Stellantis, Jeep, Dodge, Ram products. Yeah, so screwed coming up here now. Obviously, UAW strike is taking a toll, but there's a lot of other big factors. Just look, it doesn't take very long to look right here and you'll see, obviously, statistically, a lot of interest rates are climbing. You're seeing it all over. Front page news. The banks are cranking their prices up. Month on month, inflation is increasing. Of course, with that, interest rates are climbing and following everywhere thereafter. It's not uncommon to see people paying over $1,000 a month for a loan payment for their new vehicle. It's also not shocking to walk down into a Stellantis and look at a Stellantis lot and find a new Ram that's priced up at $85,000, over $100,000. I even saw TRX vehicles, that's right, they're hot rod Ram, and it was going for $150,000 Canadian. It's absolutely ludicrous. So now you're typically finding a lot of these vehicles have been going up in price or value, but what you're finding as well, unfortunately, the banks and interest rates are following suit. While these manufacturers are clearly cranking prices up, they're not picking up on what's getting thrown down. They're seeing there is an actual decline. If you follow statistically, you'll see that a lot of the sales have gone down. Most other manufacturers have seen increases and actually increase in sales volumes over the last couple years. But if you look, actually, Stellantis products as a whole is down 0.3% from 22 to 23 in the third quarter. So clearly they're starting to see a little bit of a drop. And a lot of that has to do with a few things. Clearly that's taking a toll on the company as a whole. But what it means is a lot of the folks that are buying these vehicles, the Rams, the Jeep products, Stellantis, all of these vehicles are not typically your premium or your top borrowers. In other words, the prime lending usually was 6.5. So if you had a rating of over 650, maybe 625, 600, often you could get even a slightly riskier, higher lending rate on one of your vehicles. You could actually get a vehicle, you could sign on the dotted lines and banks would sign over a big expensive loan payment. But what we're finding now is a lot of banks are getting wise to the fact that repossessions are climbing at an alarming rate. And clearly that's causing a lot of stress on the banks. They're seeing a lot of repos coming back. They may not be getting all of their money back, and so there's a big risk. So banks are now increasing some of those lending rates to what were called subprime borrowers. So a lot of people that are often, unfortunately, buyers of the Ram and the Jeep products tend to be a little bit lower on the scale or subprime lenders or borrowers, and unfortunately a lot of them are higher risk by the bank's assessments. And what you're seeing is now the banks are raising the roof on what they're considered a reasonable lend. And what we're saying is about 680 or 690 is now what they consider prime lending. So that just means that's cutting out a lot of the subprime borrowers, and even previously a 625 or a 650 where you consider a prime borrower is now possibly out of the mix and possibly can't even get a loan payment, can't even get and borrow money from the bank to buy their new Ram or to buy their new Jeep Wrangler or buy their new Jeep Grand Cherokee. And a lot of those vehicles now are just going to continue sitting on the lot. Now we also have to see there are some other things going on. Now Ram loaded up the car lots. What they are seeing is they were protecting themselves from the imminent UAW strike. Well, the strike continues on and there's some stresses around that as well. Of course, parts are harder to come by, and some of the products, of course, are filled on the lot. So just go down to a car lot that, you know, features Rams and Jeeps, and you'll find a lot of inventory. They've got some of the beefiest and heaviest inventory in the industry. Dodge has as much as 142 days of inventory on average on the lots. Chrysler has about 127 days. There's about 108 days of Rams as well available. And Jeeps are about 103. So clearly they're all on the upper end of the scale in the spectrum for availability of content. Now the problem is the import vehicles, the Mazdas, the Toyotas, and the Hondas have been on shortages. And those manufacturers are seeing a place. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to capitalize on the UAW strike and the fact that even though there's stress and strain on some of the big three, unfortunately, Toyota and Hondas aren't able to necessarily get enough product out there and backfill those. As a matter of fact, I know somebody personally who had to actually buy a Ram because they needed it for work, but they could not actually, in fact, get the Toyota Tundra that they wanted to in due time. They actually wanted the Tundra, but it meant that had to wait over a year to get it. and instead they had to default and buy themselves a Ram. And so while there's some of that going on, most people are actually in a place where they'll be willing to wait for that Toyota product, maybe be willing to wait for that, even possibly something from Honda. So a lot of the big three are going to feel more stress. Even though they have a lot of product on the lots, they're charging a lot of money for their trucks. I mean, 80 grand, there's nothing affordable about that. Yes, what you don't see though, on the other hand, are vehicles that are used for work purposes. So in other words, fleet vehicles, they're not taking a big hit there. So the big three, of course, UAW strike is not impacting as much. You know, suppliers, the Chevys, the GMs, of course, the Dodge, Stellantis, Ram, all of the big brands, F-150 by Fords and F-250s and the heavy-duty HD trucks are all still selling because they're still selling for work purposes. But it's the personal buyers, it's the buyer that needs a pickup truck for their own personal use to get around, are less and less of those buying the big three because of what's going on and high interest rates, high inflation, of course. Did you realize over 9% is the new car lending rate for a lot of these vehicles? Over 9%. That's for a prime borrower. But if you go a little further, if you're less than prime and you happen to get from a high, you know, a lender or a lender that's actually willing to take on you as a higher risk borrower, are going to see rates of 11, 12, maybe 13% on an $80,000 or $90,000 pickup truck. That's absolutely bananas. But what am I to say? People want a truck. People want an SUV. They're going to pay for it, but they're going to pay for it dearly. Now, the unfortunate part is a lot of these vehicles, they'll buy premium interest rates. Huge dollars they're throwing at a truck that's grossly overpriced. And then when these prices start to decline, which they are, and we're seeing already the pressure on the system and on the market showing that the prices are slowly declining, because of the poorer sales, and as I said, minus 0.3%, we're seeing it on the Stellantis products, just means naturally the supply and demand is going to kick into high gear, and the supply is there, demand is not, or it's wavering, and so you're going to see prices drop down. So in a year or two, what we're going to find in the next 12 to 18 months are vehicles that are slightly settled out. You might see more incentives, and the people that are buying 6 months ago, a year ago, are going to be upside down on their loan rates. Of course, even worse for people buying today with interest rates over 9% on prime borrowers, but might be 12 or 13% on subprime, means that a lot of people are buying anywhere from today or back 6 months ago are going to find themselves grossly underwater, and hence they might just get to a place where they're just going to say enough is enough. Repossession is just the easiest way out of this whole program. I might just have to default and let them come pick up the truck. And a lot of these repossessions you're finding in the auctions. Repossessions with broken windshields, they're dirty, they've been taken through the mud, they've been chastised and used and abused, because at that point the writing's on the wall, and a lot of these borrowers and buyers of these vehicles realize that they're going to miss the next bunch of payments because they have to keep a roof over their head. I mean, it's either that or a truck. And so they're saying, you know what, bank, come pick it up. I'll go buy myself an 8-year-old truck somewhere with 200,000 miles on it just to get around, and I'll default on this car loan. On top of this, we know that Jeep's already trying to brand themselves as a more premium brand. Not quite luxury, but they're touching on it. We also know that Rams, of course, are huge dollars. Even if you get the Classic, it's still a significant cash flow. But the vehicles that are up around that 80, 90, 100,000 are more typical of your half-ton, three-quarter-ton Rams. And of course, Jeeps are pricey. The whole lot of them are overpriced. And did you realize as well, the average car price transaction has actually gone down, and largely because smaller vehicle sales. Kia Rio was a big one, Mitsubishi Mirage, which are cars that are going to be discontinued. So on the non-luxury car marketplace, those actually drop that price down overall, the transaction average pricing. But unfortunately, what you're having is this situation where a lot of buyers are looking for a more cost-effective alternative to drive. I now see people, a big lumberjack where 5 years ago you'd see this guy driving a three-quarter-ton Dodge pickup truck. Now I've seen him drive a smart car or a Mitsubishi Mirage. People are having to make a move because of cost of servicing, cost of maintenance, cost of fuel, as well as cost of initial purchasing. And Rams, Stellantis products, and Jeeps are all up there. None of them are trying to drop their prices down. None of them are trying to create that lower price point. They're all trying to sell more of a premium product, but unfortunately it's the wrong time and the wrong place. And this does in fact leave Stellantis products in a real lurch. The future is unknown, and quite frankly, at this pace, I don't see the future being all that bright for Stellantis, Jeep, Ram, Chrysler products.